Welcome to Calming Harp, the sounds of David's Psalms. I'm glad you've joined us for this brief moment we share together. I will be playing some of the music that has been brought out of the Psalms. My name is Steve Rees. I play the harp, and over the last several years I've been bringing the sounds of David's Psalms into recordings. You can find a lot of my music on my website, www.calmingharp.com. I have CDs available and MP3s. And you can go to YouTube. If you go to YouTube and then type in Peregrinati, Peregrinnatti, you will find hours of beautiful harp music that you can just play in the background and be calmed with the music that David may have played for his sheep at one time or another. So as we share this half hour, join me and enjoy the sounds of David's harp. Well, let's get started. I just wanted to explain a little bit about what I've been doing with the Psalms of David. In the year 2006, I had the opportunity of going over to Israel for the Feast of Tabernacles. And while we were there, I decided that I would make it a project to talk to rabbis, archaeologists, musicians, artists, anybody that would might have some information, because I was wondering what the Psalms of David might have sounded like. So some of the best ideas I had, mostly, well, here's the idea. I thought, was there anybody that found some sheet music in one of the archaeological digs? Yeah, a piece of parchment or something, but the quick answer to that is absolutely not. But I did receive some direction from a fellow named Micha Harari. If you have been online, you may have run across a site called House of Harari, where Micha makes harps. He was a very accomplished luthier. Used to live in the redwood forests of California and decided it was time to make Aliyah. And he took his skills with him and decided when he got to Israel to begin making harps instead of guitars. And you can go to that site, houseofharari.com, and get his story. But he suggested to me that there might be a combination between each Hebrew letter and a musical note. In fact, he had taken a little harp and had 22 strings, which equaled the number of characters in the alphabet of the Hebrew language. And he had carved one of those letters at the base of each string. So I asked him, I said, well, how did you decide which letter to put which string, which note? And he said, well, I just started at the bottom and went to the top. But what he had done gave me an idea, and so I started working with bringing the middle of the Hebrew alphabet across to the middle of the musical scale, which I took to be the yod across to the middle C. And I began to work off of that. Later on, I would discover a whole much more mathematical program to work with, and I'll share that along the way. Possibly not this time, but we'll get to it. So the first psalm I did was a psalm of Psalm 23. I thought, that must be a good place to start. Everybody's favorite psalm. And so I'm going to play that for you in just a minute here, but I just wanted to share one more thing. I tried playing the psalm as a note-to-note, letter-to-letter, and just make that like a melody, and that did not sound real. It didn't make musical sense. And so I was praying about that. I said, Father, I think there's something here, but I just need to understand this a little better. And I believe I had an understanding that there was more than one note in each Hebrew word because there is more than one letter. And if you play more than one note at the same time, you end up with a chord. And so I started figuring out which chord would be dominant with each of the Hebrew words, and then started playing chord to chord to chord. And that began to make musical sense. And then what I started doing was looking for chord progressions. Essentially, that gives you chord progressions, which is really how music works. You musicians would recognize that. When you play a piece, there's the chord that goes with the melody, and then another chord changes to go with the melody, and you go down your music line like that. And so I started looking through the chords. I would just play them one after another, and I started listening for what I call musical phrasing, in other words, music that could be a chorus, a verse, possibly a bridge. And I started putting those together. And so the first composition I did was Psalm 23, and I will play that for you, and let's see what you think about how it sounds. I would encourage you, if you would like, to get your scripture out, turn it to Psalm 23, and as you hear this music of the psalm, read the words and put those two together and see what it does in your heart and your mind and your spirit. So here's Psalm 23. So that's Psalm 23. I had one person write on a comment on my YouTube, "It was like the words were flying past me." I'm not sure how you responded to that, but I've had many people comment at how there was an amazing set of dynamics that occurred when the music and the words were being brought together. Another psalm that I worked on fairly early on was I started working on the Psalms of Ascent. I believed that they held an important uh, part of what David was trying to do. Remember, the Psalms of Ascent, many people believe that they were used as the pilgrims would come up to the feast 3 times a year. And if any of you have ever been to Israel, you would know that when you come to Jerusalem from either the coast or from Jericho or the Dead Sea, you come up. Jerusalem's at 3,000 foot elevation. And if you're in Jericho, you're at almost minus 1,000. And if you're down at the Dead Sea, you're at zero. I mean at the Mediterranean Sea. And so to go to Jerusalem, you have to come up. And so aliyah in the Hebrew means to come up or rise. In fact, when people make aliyah to come and live in Israel, they're using that term because they're inviting people to come up to Israel, come up to the city of the great king of the universe. So David wrote this set of psalms that were called the Psalms of Ascent. And the interesting thing, another thing, just to share with you, it's also believed that there were 15 steps between the court of the men and the brazen altar. And every morning, the priests, the Levites, would stand on each one of those steps and sing one of those psalms of ascent. And each time they sang a psalm, finished, they would come up to the next step and start the next psalm. And so, once again, they were called the Psalms of Coming Up. And so that's another just kind of a neat thing to think about in relationship to these Psalms. So I did Psalm 121 fairly early on. And the beautiful thing about this Psalm is the very first part of it. I didn't even find a musical phrasing. I just played the chords of each word of the beginning of that psalm. And the first chords that you'll hear in this song are directly out of it, word for word for word, which not all the psalms work out so well, but this one. And so think about this. This is, I lift my eyes to the hills or the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from Yahweh, who made heaven and earth. He doesn't sleep or slumber. So just think of those chords, what you're hearing those chords do, and then what those words are saying. So you can hear those chords starting at the low, actually starts the key of F, the F chord, and then it moves up to the A minor, and then it moves up to the C, and then the D minor. And it just, you can just feel that rising taking place. A lot of people ask me, you've got the chord progressions, but how do you know what they're supposed to sound like? And my answer to that is, once I've determined the musical phrasing that I feel is sounding good, I begin to read the words of the Psalms, and I try to think about those words. What would they sound like? Is it militaristic? Would it be a 4/4 march? Is it intimate, like Psalm 91? They that dwell in the secret place of the Most High, a secret place. It sounds like coming in close and intimate, and so I think of that as like a waltz or a 3/4 timing. So those are kind of the ways. Should it be loud? Should it be soft? Is it celebrating, or is it contemplative? Those are the kind of things that I take into account as I put this compositions together. Um, you know, I'm willing to accept criticism that I don't really know for sure how David would have played this. I tell people all the time, I would really like to be able to sit down with David and hear his version of these psalms. But I really do think that it's close. I think that there's not going to be. The interesting thing about music, in fact, on my website, I have a page called Collaboration. And what my hope and desire is that people who come on to the website and like what they're hearing, maybe they play a different instrument. Maybe they play a cello or a flute or a saxophone or something else. And to take these chord progressions, these sounds, and reinterpret them with those instruments and see what they come up with. So that's why I call it the Collaborate page, because I really would like people to share. And wonderfully so, I have had a lot of people contact me and get more direction about what I've been doing and sharing some of the technique of how I'm bringing it together. And I'm so willing to do that because I really am looking forward to somebody coming out with a whole new phrasing or whole new interpretation of what's there. So I don't have a lot of time here to go into too much more music. I would just like to encourage you to go to the website www.calmingharp.com, HARP. If you listen to the harp, it makes you calm. Share with people. Don't hesitate to download stuff off of YouTube. I don't mind that at all. What I have found is a lot of people who are fighting cancers or other physical ailments have found this music to be very encouraging, very peaceful, very healing. I have people tell me that they believe they were healed with this music. I don't make that claim, but I can tell you some pretty interesting stories about that, and maybe one of these episodes I will go into some of those stories. Suffice it to say that when we read in 1 Samuel that King Saul had a troubling spirit come over him, and they called for a harpist, and that harpist happened to be King David. And they called for him to come and play for King Saul, and it records in 1 Samuel that as David played, the troubling spirit would leave. And I have to tell you, out of my own experience, I played the harp many times to my hemodialysis patients. I'm a registered nurse, and I had a small harp that I made to get started with. And I would take that in to play, and as I would play, I would see some amazing physiological effects. I would see blood pressures come down, oxygen saturations come up, and I started wondering, was there a connection between the music and what I was seeing in the physiology of these patients? And I really believe I did, that there was a relationship and is a relationship. And down the road, my son encouraged me. He said, "Dad, you need to get this on the internet so that people in places that you'll never be able to perform will be able to hear and be able to benefit from it." And so that's what I did with my son. He helped me. I said, "I don't know how to do a website," so he helped me get it started. And since then, between that and YouTube, I've had over 2 million people come on site. So I really believe that the Father was directing in bringing this music to a wider audience for people to be blessed and made relaxed and whole. And I pray that that would be the same for you today. So I hope you've enjoyed our time together. Stay tuned, as I say. Little pun. I have many more songs to share with you. I have more to share about how this all comes together. And I pray that you will share and help people, especially those you see stressed, especially in these times that we're going through. Bring people to this calming and this peace and this rest that this beautiful music of the Psalms of David brings to each of our lives. Thank you for listening. Hope to see you next week. Many, many blessings to you all today.